My name is Angelica Garcia. I will be going over my research on gendered aggression as well as 5 pieces of literature on this topic. My research question is, what is the gender differences in aggressive behavior? This is important to me because I grew up in an abusive home where my father would be abusive towards my mother, which caused my mother to be abusive towards her children. Some potential contributions to the population is that if we're able to determine what causes these gender differences, we might be able to formulate ways to prevent the behavior. The first piece of literature that I will be going over is from Lansford in 2018. She studied the development of aggression, and she was able to conclude that the 5 forms of aggression are physical, verbal, indirect, relational, and social. She also came up with 2 main functions of aggression, which are reactive and proactive. Through her studies, she was able to determine that greater attention to forms and functions of aggression has contributed to better understanding of which kinds of aggressions develop, how they develop in different circumstances, and how they develop in different individuals. The next piece of literature is by Burton, Henninger, Haffetz, and Kofer. In 2019, they studied aggression through gender typical play and prenatal hormonal index. They did this by gathering 134 university students, and they started by measuring the finger lengths of each participant to measure for a prenatal androgen. They also gave the participants 2 questionnaires. One was to evaluate childhood play behaviors, and the other one was to evaluate physical aggression. Through their study and their reports, they found that the male subjects reported more total aggression than the females. And also, when it comes to aggression, the finger length ratios were related to the current aggression and childhood play, and that the relationship between reports of current aggressive behavior and childhood play behavior suggests that over time a certain stability comes. The next literature is by Borgqvist in 2017. He studied the gender differences in aggressive behavior. He did this by relying mostly on self-reported data, parental reports, teacher reports, peer nominations, and peer estimations. So through his data that he gathered, he found that the girls use indirect aggression more than the boys, but the boys use more physical aggression. When it came to verbal aggression, both boys and girls were about equal. The next piece of literature that I will be going over is by Navet, Einsner, Malti, and Rebute. They studied the types of aggression between sexes. They did this by going to 56 elementary schools. From these elementary schools, they gathered a total of 1,675 first graders. With these first graders, they studied them for a period of 7 years, and they were able to get teacher assessments on each child by the same teacher based on their academic performance. After that, they separated the data that they gathered by children who grew up with both of their biological parents versus those children who didn't have both of them. Also, they separated them by the children whose parents had higher and lower gender inequality backgrounds. They were able to find through different questionnaires and the academic performance assessments that the teachers gave that a social role theory plays a small role in the variation in sex differences across families with different cultural backgrounds. However, this doesn't explain why there is a different aggression manifestation across the cultures and social structures. The next literature is from Wolfer and Houston. In 2015, they studied how intra and intersex affects aggression. They came up with 2-hour sessions from in 14-year-old children, and they were able to compare standardized questionnaires between integrations, sociometric data, and school achievement. So in their study, they found that the sex difference in intersex aggression was mostly based on the proportionally high number of ethnic minority students. But also they found that sexual selection predictors explain the sex differences in intrasex aggression. But in intersex aggression, the social role predictors explain that sex difference. Overall, these articles are able to show a clear pattern and a clear gathering that males are more aggressive than females. Some studies agreed that it was because of hormonal levels, and other studies agreed that it was biological factors that interfered with that difference of aggression between the genders. For my research, I chose the secondary data as my research method. So secondary data is using data that's already available in order to create a new purpose or interpretation on this topic. So Little and McGivern in their paper explained that using this available information saves time and money, but it also adds a new depth to the study. In my study, I used the FBI's Uniform Crime Reporting arrest records by sex in 2012 to measure this aggressive behavior between the sexes through violent crimes committed. Using secondary data is not as often as gathering your own data in original studies. However, it's still used in a sociological perspective. By using secondary data, the researcher is still able to contribute to the research out there. So Little and McGivern explained that they use this data in context analysis in order to come up with different codes and different reliability and consistently observed patterns. And they gather this and they put it in textual outputs. So in the FBI's Uniform Crime Reporting data, I was able to find this original data set where it mentions the offenses, which are murder and non-negligent manslaughter, forcible rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. These 4 offenses are considered violent crimes. They explain the total number of persons arrested, and they were able to find the male percentage as well as the female percentage for each offense. By looking at the data, I was able to explain that aggravated assault is the most common violent crime charged in both males and females. And as you can see here, 80.1% of violent crimes arrests made were males that were committing these crimes. And if you see here, this is where it shows that the aggravated assault is the most common violent crime. Also, When only looking at the genders, I was able to come up with the explanation that males have higher tendency to be charged with violent offenses. As you can see, the blue section is the males, and you can see there's a overwhelming amount of blue in this chart. The orange section is the female section, and they're still on there. They're still committing these violent crimes. However, it's not nearly as often as the males. So, as I stated, males are more likely to commit violent crimes. And if you see here, the orange is the overall violent percentage of crimes, and the aggravated assault is still the highest, and it's still the highest in both genders, both male and female. Through the textbook readings, I was able to notice that there are four main reasons as to why aggression happens. And the textbook explains that aggression is an instinct. So individuals are already born with this need to be aggressive, with this urge to destroy. The textbook explains that this urge is as natural as our need to breathe. So we are already come into this world knowing how to be aggressive. We don't need to socialize or have any training on how to be aggressive. The next one is frustration aggression hypothesis, which explains that every frustration that we feel leads to some sort of aggression. And also, every aggressive act is due to some frustration in the past. The next reason is aversive emotional arousal. So, this explains that when people behave aggressively, it's usually in response to a negative effect or feeling. And when they act aggressively, it's more often instrumental. It's their defense. And the last reason is for potential rewards. So the textbook explains that there are three types of rewards that promote aggression, and those rewards are direct material benefits, social approval, and for attention. When looking at the literature, I was able to come up with some relevance to it based on the data that I collected and reviewed. So Lansford, in her 2018 study of aggression, she said that aggression functions are reaction and proactive. So violent crimes can be both. It can be one or the other. So reactive violent crimes, an example of that would be if an individual says something that another individual doesn't like, and that individual in turn behaves aggressively. So that may escalate to aggravated assault. So in this case, the individual reacted to an event without thinking of any future consequences. Also, an example of proactive violent crimes could be, for example, if an individual has rivalry with another individual and this individual seeks to commit murder, and this individual didn't wait until there was a confrontation or anything. He just acted before the crisis or before the confrontation. So through all of these studies and data, there seems to be a clear trend, as Borkovich explained in his 2017 study, that males are more aggressive than females. Through my research, I came across a limitation, which was I wasn't sure what caused this violent crime, so I still wasn't able to see the motivation behind these crimes. So for future research, I would like to focus on the motivation to see if the motivation is different between the genders.